I'm Tom Langner.
And I'm Rob Oler.
And we are with American Senior Benefits, Smith Insurance Services in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
And this is
Tom and Rob making sense, hopefully.
So let's make some sense out of Medicare.
Well, shall we?
I hope so.
We shall.
So, Tom,
Yes, sir.
what's Medicare?
Oh, Medicare. Let me tell you. On a serious note, Medicare was started during the Johnson administration in 1966 as a means to provide health care and, more directly, health insurance for senior citizens.
Okay, so is Medicare and Medicaid the same?
Not quite.
Because that's a lot of people call it, they say, oh, I have Medicaid, but they kind of mean Medicare.
That's correct. And there are some various differences. Medicare being strictly for senior citizens and actually people that are permanently disabled. Medicaid is more of an income-based system where you have income limits, and if you're below those income limits, you qualify for medical services and medical insurance that is paid for in some respects like Medicare. But Medicare is a more comprehensive system based on the fact that you've achieved a certain age and or, like as I mentioned to you before, a permanent disability.
Gotcha. Wait, so I'm 44. Can I get Medicare?
If you're permanently disabled, Rob, and some might say that actually might be the case, but let's not go into that right now.
You're a funny guy. But can I get Medicare?
You will be eligible for Medicare at the age of 65. Actually, in the first day of your birth month that you turn 65.
All right, so my birthday is June 12th.
So June 1st, whatever year that is, that you turn 65 in, you will become Medicare eligible. In fact, mine is coming up sooner than later, unfortunately.
That's true. That's true. All right. So you also mentioned disability or somebody that's disabled.
That's correct. If you are permanently disabled, after a 2-year period of actually qualifying for Social Security disability insurance, you become eligible for Medicare at that point. So you can be of any age at that point. You can even anywhere from 18 and up, you can qualify for Medicare if you're permanently disabled and qualify for Social Security disability after 2 years.
All right. That's some pretty good information.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
I mean that's gold, baby.
That is gold. It's almost like we're making sense.
Let's wait till we get to the end of this video before we make that determination.
All right, fair enough.
But as we mentioned to you before, and I'm going to let Rob take a big portion of this, traditionally Medicare has involved 2 parts. Now there have been some that have been added since, but originally Medicare was created in 2 parts, and that's Part A and Part B. We are not talking about anything other than Medicare right now. We are not talking about how to fill in the cracks where Medicare leaves off.
Right.
This is strictly a Medicare talk. So, Medicare Part A.
Ta-da.
Ta-da.
So, Medicare Part A deals with the hospitalization of Medicare. What that means is it's not the services you would receive in the hospital or doctor. It is basically the walls, bricks, mortar, semi-private room.
I don't get my own room?
Well, if you want to pay the difference, you have that opportunity with many hospitals.
That is out of pocket.
And I recommend, there's nothing better than rehabilitation or getting better in your own room. But Medicare covers a semi-private room and your food under Part A. Also covers your skilled nursing. Now, what skilled nursing is that you are getting better. The doctor is not needed to look over you 24/7. You are getting better, but you're not quite well enough to go home.
So we're talking rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation.
Yeah, which is a little bit different than, because we're talking about skilled nursing care, and most people think about a long-term nursing home stay.
Right.
No, where this is not. This is not the skilled nursing care that is accessed through Medicare is strictly for rehabilitative services. You are ill, you've had an accident, and you will recover, or they expect you to recover.
Right, exactly. And for those that don't recover, that they can't go home, and they are deemed terminally ill by a doctor, another part of Medicare Part A that is covered as hospice care. So that is also falls under the Part A of Medicare. Now,
so Rob,
What?
I'm Medicare eligible.
Right.
I do have a health occurrence.
Okay.
I expect a hospital stay. How does that work?
In regards to how much does it cost?
Yeah.
Well, that's what most people really worry about. How much is this going to hit the bottom line? How is my pocketbook going to be affected? I have Medicare. I've been waiting to retire and see the golden years of my life. But it could. That's why it's called the golden years, because it's as expensive as gold. So, there are some deductibles and copays that classify under Part A of Medicare. Now, when they bill you, and that is, again, the number one thing people are worried about is the billing, the cost of Medicare associated with their hospital or services. The first 60 days of what is called a benefit period, okay? Benefit period, days 1 through 60, are covered under your Part A deductible. That they offer is $1,316. 2017 numbers. So the first 60 days,
Excuse me.
sure, your Part A deductible is $1,316. Now, a benefit period can be as short as 61 days. The one day you were in the hospital, and that benefit period will continue until you are out of the hospital for 60 consecutive days. Now, if you're in a hospital for, say, 7 days with pneumonia, it's going to snow tomorrow. We're in Northeast PA. Now you get pneumonia, you go into the hospital for 7 days. Now you're out of the hospital for, say, 2 weeks. Then something happens, you have a reoccurrence or a different ailment, doesn't matter. It could be bronchitis, it could be a slip and fall, it doesn't matter. As long as it's not, covered under a different, like, auto insurance. That benefit period will continue, again, until you're out of the hospital for 60 consecutive days. So they're looking at the time you are actually in the hospital overnight. So the 7 days of your pneumonia, then you're in there for 3 days for bronchitis or something else. 3 and 7, that's 10 days. Doesn't matter the 14 days that you were out. So
what you're actually trying to tell me, or actually what you're trying to tell the viewer, is that Part A does not work on an annual deductible system. It works on a benefit period system where you can have multiple periods within the course of 1 year.
Yeah.
That's important to know.
That is important to know. It's kind of making sense.
Yeah.
So, what if you're in the hospital past that 60 days? Well, that's the second step of Medicare Part A, and they're going to have some co-payments, co-insurance. It's $239 a day. $239 a day for those days from 61 into 90. Now, Now this can happen. Everybody's like, oh, I'm going to be in the hospital for 3 days. They're just going to kick me out. Well, what if you're in a coma? What if you have an ailment that's going to have you past that 60 days and you are from days 91 plus? They're going to ask you for $658 a day of your lifetime reserve days. Now, they're called lifetime reserve days for a reason, because once you use one, you lose them.
And how many do you get during your lifetime, Rob?
You get 60. So 60 lifetime reserve. They love the number 60. 60 days in a benefit period, first 60 days of Part A deductible, then 60 days lifetime reserve days. That's a lot of money. Even those lifetime reserve days added up at $658 a day equate to $39,480.
That's some good math there, Rob. How did you figure that out?
Because we did it before we hit play.
That's true. That's true.
We're
we are
prepared.
smart like that.
Yeah, that's how we make sense.
That's the only way we're smart, but we're smart like that.
That's right. So that takes care of your semi-private room. Let's move on over to the skilled nursing.
Skilled nursing care.
Yeah.
Again, rehabilitative care here, people.
Yes. Now, skilled nursing, like I said, is for when they want you to go home. They're looking to rehabilitate you and get you back to your normal life as much as possible, depending on the situation. It could be knee surgery. You need some skilled nursing, some therapy. Now, there's some qualifications. What are the qualifications?
Well, the qualifications, yes.
Down.
And I'm not going to necessarily have to read these, but it's good to have a reference. First and foremost, you do need to have you have to have days left on your benefit period, which means that you can't just be out of the hospital for those 60 days and then be scheduled to have rehabilitative care. You pretty much have to go from the hospital almost virtually to the rehabilitative care
So you have
facility.
to have a qualified hospital stay.
That you do. You have to have a qualified hospital stay, which usually involves a period of 3 days in the hospital to be released no earlier than the third day to the facility.
Okay.
You also it has to be prescribed by the doctor. It cannot be just you go to the hospital, you need rehabilitative care, but your doctor doesn't feel you need it, and you decide that you want to do it on your own. If that's the case, that's a length of care that you're going to have to pay by yourself. But for the most part, the doctor is normally going to prescribe some form of rehabilitative care if you need it. You do need to go to a certified Medicare facility. Again, not a high hurdle to cross, but you can't just pick your own facility, especially if it's not Medicare approved. And you have to need those services for a hospital-related event, or you have to have a condition that started in a skilled nursing care facility that was as a result of a hospital-related stay. Those are, again, these are all things that the doctors and hospitals know already, but it has come to pass that certain people have gotten rehabilitative care that didn't meet those qualifications, and if Medicare doesn't approve those costs, they are your responsibility at that point. So you need to be aware of these things, or at least have a family member, because again, the last thing you want to be doing when you're in the hospital is worrying about these issues. So make sure that you know them, and that anybody that is helping you with your care knows this as well. Rob, what about costs?
Well, the costs are a little bit easier to understand. The first 20 days are paid for by Medicare, 100%. They do well by you. They cover it 100%. Now, the next days, 21 to 100, well, they're going to continue to pay, but again, they're going to ask you to kind of put some of your own money into it, so it offsets some of the cost to the federal government. So that cost is $164.50 per day from days 21 and 100. Now, again, they're looking to get you home, so that's a long period, 100 days of rehabilitation and skilled nursing is a quite adequate period of time. But if it does go past that day of 100, or past day 100, you would be responsible for all costs associated with skilled nursing.
That's correct.
Now,
and why is that? I mean, what's the logic behind the magic 100-day number? I guess the answer would be if Medicare's logic is that if you need rehabilitative care past 100 days, then more than likely you're a candidate for skilled nursing care, or in a traditional sense, that they don't feel you're going to get better beyond that point. Mm-hmm. Now, that may or may not be the case, but we're talking about law of averages here, and for the most part, if you're in rehabilitation past 100 days, you've had an issue, and that's. Unfortunately, you may still need rehabilitative care, but it's not something that Medicare is going to pick up.
Now
Just FYI.
Now, you said earlier, what about long-term care?
I said a lot of things. What are you talking about?
Well, long-term care.
Yes.
Well, doesn't Medicare? Didn't you say something about long-term care?
Yeah,
I did.
Have
caught what you said.
Well, again, long-term care is a different issue than skilled nursing care in the sense that we're talking about, and that long-term care revolves around they're just trying to keep you at an even keel. In other words, it's usually associated with acts of daily living. Mm-hmm. You are not capable and are not expected to be capable of accomplishing 2 or 3 out of the 6 or 7 different acts of daily living, like dressing, bathing, medicating, feeding, being ambulatory, and things of that nature. So if you're not capable and they don't expect you to be capable of managing those acts of daily living, then that's long-term care.
Okay, so how does Medicare pay for that?
They do not.
Not anything.
No, they do not.
Okay,
so that's something to be aware of. Yeah, absolutely.
That's just, again, making more sense.
We're trying to make sense here.
We're doing it.
We are doing it.
Something.
I think we're doing it.
I hope. Do you think we are?
Stop pointing. That's rude.
Yes.
That's rude.
It's right back at me. Okay.
That's right.
All right, so another part of Part A that is covered is hospice care. Hospice care is the end situation of your life where the doctor would classify you or find you terminally ill. Most situations, Medicare has done very well in this situation where they do pay most of the costs associated with hospice.
Yeah, that's virtually a 100% situation, and it wasn't always the case. It has been relatively a new phenomenon where Medicare has deemed it logical to cover 100% of most associated costs with hospice care, and that's it's a good thing in the sense that it takes a lot of that onus off the family in planning for it, and it makes our job a little bit easier too.
Yeah. So that's part A, where you've seen the doctors, the nurses, the hospital, right?
That's right.
Or is it? We're trying to make sense of this.
Oh my goodness, you're correct. We haven't touched on the medical services part,
right?
Because all we really have paid for has been, again, as you mentioned before, the bricks and mortar and semi-private hospital stay and things of that nature. So this is where
Okay, another part of Part A that is covered that we haven't touched on is hospice care.
Yes.
So what's hospice care?
Oh, you're asking me now.
Sure.
Hospice care generally revolves around terminally ill patients that have limited expectation of life. And the good news is that
Medicare does very well by it. They used to not cover everything in hospice, but now that you are deemed terminally ill, it's a 90+% paid for. Just
sometimes there's some prescriptions that aren't covered, and you got to pick up, let's say, 5% or something of that nature. It's not. It's a virtual 100% situation.
Sure, makes sense.
Excuse me.
So that basically covers Part A of Medicare, where we've talked about the hospital stay. Okay, another part of Medicare, Part A, that is covered is hospice care, and that basically is theoretically 100%. It's not 100%. There may be some prescriptions that aren't necessarily covered. They have a slight copay to pay for, but virtually it's the majority of hospice is covered by Medicare, which has always been the case.
Not always been the case, and essentially, like I said, hospice care, if you don't know, is essentially a system of skilled nursing care for terminally ill patients, people that are not expected not only just to recover or rehabilitate, but their expectation of life expectancy, their life expectancy is very low, usually 12 months or if your life expectancy is 12 months or less, you qualify for hospice care under Medicare, and as Rob mentioned, it used to be a system where there were some co-pays involved, but virtually within the last 10 years or so, virtually all costs related with hospice care have been picked up by Medicare, and that's a new phenomenon. There's no question. It went 40 plus years the other way, so it's a good thing for families, and not having to worry about that.
Right. So we pretty much touched on Part A, where they talk about the hospital, skilled nursing, hospice, the doctors and nurses.
No, hey, hang on now, sir. Part A, we didn't talk about anything having to do with medical services like doctors and nurses and things of that nature.
Why didn't we?
Because that's a whole different part. And that part, if in case you were wondering, was Part B.
Oh, that's right. Part B of Medicare. Is there a deductible?
I believe there is, and I believe that it is $183 a year, and that is a big difference between Part A as well. Where Part A works on the benefit period, as we discussed, Part B works on an annualized deductible of $183 for the year of 2017.
2017.
That's correct.
So we pay $183 for Part B, and that's it?
No, sir. And in point of fact, when you speak about paying for Part B, that is true. There is a Part B premium that you pay. Right. Whereas Part A is actually paid for during your working years. Part B is actually a premium that you pay, and most people pay it out of their Social Security benefits. And the actual premium, which used to be a static premium, can now vary depending on your income.
Right.
So we aren't going to get into what anybody in particular pays for their Part B premium.
Because it does change.
It does change, and it can be as high as almost $200 a month, and most people pay quite a bit less than that. Right. But having said that, there is a premium for the Part B where there isn't for Part A, and there is an annualized deductible, which we just mentioned, of $183. But beyond that, what are they looking at?
Nothing, right? They just pay $183.
I'm sorry, sir. If that were the case,
It'd be great.
that would be great. We'd be out of a job, but it would be great for the people involved. That's the 20% that most people talk about when they talk about Medicare.
That's the 80-20 that people
And
talk
if you
about.
put your hand in front of my face again and block this beautiful view, something's going down.
Yeah, make comments below, please. Anyway, so that's where the 80-20 comes in.
That's where the 80-20 comes in, yeah.
And so Medicare pays the 80%,
That's correct.
and they would be responsible for the 20%.
That is correct. Now, what is medical services? What are we talking about?
I know the doctor,
Mm-hmm.
your assistant surgeon's fees, your ambulatory, either by vehicle or air, is also included. Durable medical equipment. What else?
For the most part, that covers it. Like I said, nurses, anesthetists,
Yeah.
surgeons, doctors, medical procedures, your MRIs,
Yes,
your
CAT
CAT scans.
scans, Quite a bit.
It is quite a bit.
So everything outside of, like we said, the hospital, walls, brick and mortar, food, semi-private room is A. The services you receive once in the facility or in a doctor's office or such
That's right.
is paid for by Part B.
That's correct.
Seems like you get
And it seems like a
more.
lot. I mean, 80% is a big chunk. You know, that's a lot of dollars that Medicare is paying out, and most people would be very fine with saying 20% is not too bad.
Mm-hmm.
However, as we all know right now, there are medical issues that you run into where it can run into the six figures and beyond in terms of cost, and that 20% now becomes a figure that is almost insurmountable for most people. So,
Yeah,
that is
so
an
a
issue.
$100,000 procedure, you're looking at $80,000 paid by Medicare, but $20,000 to
that is
person
due
on
that is
Medicare.
due to the Medicare
Yeah.
recipient, and that's no small potatoes.
That was quick on that Part B, but it kind of is. Once you're away from the numbers, it kind of just explains everything.
It
to
does.
you.
It does.
So,
And it's fairly simplistic in its nature, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't add up.
no, it does. That again, that's the majority of what is paid by Medicare is Part B.
That's correct.
You know, so
That's correct. And as we mentioned before, I mean, and again, this is where the questions and comments below can come into play. There are two other parts of Medicare that we haven't really touched on, and to be quite frank, is not something that we want to take up in a generalized Medicare talk, because they are newer in nature, and number two, we'll have discussions on them in a specific sense in a different talk going forward. But those are Part C and Part D. Part C being your Medicare Advantage programs. Those are programs where the Medicare recipient actually contracts with the entity, and again, not talking specifically, because each region of a state and every state has their own programs, and never the twain shall meet. So, talking in a non-specific sense, you are essentially opting out of Medicare as a Medicare recipient to contract with that entity to handle your Medicare services from that point forward. And there, as you mentioned, HMOs, PPOs, private fee for services. And in a simplistic sense, that's what Part C is. What's Part D?
Part D, they made it kind of simple. D equals drugs and the drug programs, and again, those are specific for the individual. Each individual takes specific prescriptions. So that we'll do that talk at another Making Sense.
Yeah, we can do that. I mean,
episode.
those are intense enough that they should warrant their own program, simply because the specifics of them make it such that they need their own. They need their own couple of minutes.
So I hope this kind of helped you, because I'll have to say, this is Tom.
And this is Rob.
And this is
Making
Sense. Now, we hope we did make a little bit more sense out of Medicare for you. If you have any questions, this is the number to contact us, 570-575-5836. If you like Making Sense with Tom and Rob,
And you want to see more?
like and share make some comments below. And we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
And please refrain from personal comments that are derogatory in nature to the actual host.
About this guy.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, we appreciate taking the time for you watching this episode.
We promise to get better,
Yeah.
but we will always try to give you the right information that you need. And if you need more specific answers, then that's where giving us a call or putting a comment below, and we will. What we promise is the answers will always be correct.
And they'll make sense.
That's correct.
All right. Have a good day.